I found some leaky mica caps in my RCA 630TS, so I ordered up replacements on Mauser. While I'm waiting for those to arrive, I figured, what the heck, I might as well take a whack at restoring this Motorola 7VT3 that I picked up recently. When I got it, I said I was a little bit confused about the model number. Well, it turns out the 7VT2 is the black for sure, and I'm pretty darn sure the 7VT3 is this brown model. So, as you may recall, I did power this up and I got sound, and I noticed a bit of a trace when I turned the set off. Well, since then I've run the set a little bit longer, and it seems like maybe the caps are reforming a little bit, and there's actually a bit of a raster visible while the set's turned on in very dim lighting, so I'll show you that in a moment. Now, unlike the VT71 with a TS4J late chassis I restored a couple weeks ago, I am not going to restuff all the caps in this. This uses a TS18 chassis, so it's a little bit different, so hopefully it'll still hold some interest to you guys. Also, I'll try to keep the video short and sweet, so I'm going to take this out of the cabinet and get to recapping it. Also, I should mention I've done a little bit of work already. I cleaned up the cabinet with some Novus number 2, and it's in pretty good shape. This would be the worst scratch right here. And see light scratches here and there, but no cracks, no breaks. And let's see. Oh, I reseated the CRT. When I got it, it was really flopping around loose because the mounting screw was completely gone. And the bit of foam that sits around here was still there, but it had become dislodged and it was mushed against the CRT and was kind of like melted into it. I was able to carefully pry it off, and it was in decent enough shape. I was able to reseat it around there, push the CRT up tight against it, replace the screw and tightened it down, so it's all firmly mounted. I also replaced all the feet. The originals were all rock hard and rotting away, so I ordered these up from Allied Electronics. These are the type of rubber feet that have a washer built in. Adds a little bit of extra strength, and got one in each corner now, so it sits pretty stable, nice and cushioned. Here's a look at the back side. So there's the bracket that wraps around the CRT neck. It's really just a piece of aluminum, and it screws into that block of wood. That screw is gone, so that aluminum piece was just flopping loose and wasn't really holding the CRT secure at all. Now, something else about this set is the chassis was quite rusty, in spite of being copper plated. Corrosion got the better of it in numerous spots, so I have applied a bit of naval jelly here and there just to kind of start tackling it. Eventually I may go ahead and primer that and paint the whole thing copper. I don't know, that's a bit of work to mask all this stuff off, but at the very least I want to get rid of the rust and brush on some primer just to stop the rust in its tracks. Alright, so I will unattach the chassis, in other words, remove all the bolts from underneath it and slide it out. So you can see this is a TS18 chassis. I'll highlight the differences between this chassis and the TS4 once I get it out. Maybe I can get a little glow out of the CRT, we'll see. Oh yeah. Really good sound. I mentioned there were some differences between this TS18 and the earlier TS4. Well, probably the most striking is the tuner. The TS4 has a whole bunch of slugs up here for tuning the local oscillator for a particular channel and tuning the antenna and bandpass filter, I believe. This has nothing. I assume that was to save money. What they did instead is, it's just these coils around here. I've never done it, but I imagine if you needed to adjust one of these, you're just going to be pinching or spreading apart these coils. And I don't envy you. That seems like it'd be quite a challenge. So we got 3 tiers here. One will be the local oscillator, one will be the antenna, and one is the bandpass filter. These sets only have 8 positions, so they're preset probably by the dealer for your area. I don't know what channels these are set to, but I figure if I either get 3 or 4, that's good enough for me. Most of the caps are original. You can see they're the nice old waxy caps with the Motorola logo on them. A few replacements here and there, and as I mentioned in the earlier video, crappy repair there. Another difference between this and the TS4 is there's a chunk of metal missing here. I'm not entirely sure why they did that. Maybe to make production easier because they could get at these parts right in here and solder them and hook them up without having to squeeze in between the piece of metal here. Probably saved a few cents on production material costs too. And there are subtle differences throughout the whole set. But the tuner is the most significant. Alright, so as I said, I am not going to restuff these paper caps. I'm just going to start clipping them out. I know there's been some work done, so I am going to also grab a copy of the service info and double check some of the areas that have seen work. Okay, I've printed out the SAMs, which gives me a visual indicator of what parts go where, so that'll hopefully let me track down things like this, where there's a resistor that's kind of been hacked in and I'm not sure if it's supposed to be there or what the value is. I've got my schematic, I've dug up some new capacitors, and I got a cup of coffee. So, first thing I'm going to do is tackle the vertical circuitry. If you're wondering why does the vertical so often go out in these old sets, well, I think it's because it runs at a fairly low frequency, like 60 Hertz, and so they use much larger capacitors, so I think they're more sensitive to leakage in the capacitors than, say, the horizontal circuit, which runs at nearly 16,000 Hertz. So let's look at the vertical oscillator first. So we've got some high value resistors that may have drifted off, like 3.3 meg, 2.2 meg, 2.2 meg. And then we got some caps in here, 0.1, 0.05. Alright, so we'll start in this area here, which is 1/2 of a 12SN7V9. I gotta figure out where that is in here. Well, that's one thing I didn't print out, so I'll go take a look at the tube chart and figure out where V9 is in the associated circuitry. I rotated the chassis around so it matches the parts locator, and it turns out that these 2 controls are the vertical controls. So this one is vertical hold, this one is vertical size. This resistor here should be 2.2 meg, not 68K that's in there, and it goes down to a really ugly solder joint. And it's associated with this replacement capacitor here too, so this stuff is going to get cleaned up. But the actual vertical oscillator tube is way over here, and they have wires snaking down through and around over to here. So I'm going to be working over here and over here to start out with. I ended up replacing two ugly caps that I don't think were originals and replaced that 68K resistor with a proper 2.2 meg and cleaned up some very ugly solder joints. Alright, let's see if that actually accomplished anything. I didn't hook the speaker up so we won't get any sound. Seems like there's still some weirdness going on there. Alright, well, I will keep plugging away at it. It's weird, it seems like it was oscillating kind of, but really, really slow. Actually, yeah, and then okay, so at first it's oscillating, it fills up the full screen and it dies down, and now it's oscillating really slowly. It's like once every 2 seconds you see a little wave go by, so something's not right. Maybe that's why the guy went from 2.2 meg to 56K, because there's some other time constant is so far off that he was trying to compensate for it with using a lower valued resistor. Okay, this time around I replaced the two vertical high voltage coupling capacitors. These two nice new white ASC high voltage caps. And I think I may have found the problem with the vertical, or at least I'm sure this was causing some problem. I don't know if it was the only problem, but it certainly was a problem. That's a 22 mega ohm resistor. That's part of a feedback between the vertical output and the oscillator. This was measuring over 35 meg. In fact, I had a hard time measuring it at all with my meters because it was really exceeding the range. So I replaced that with a new 22 meg. Also notice while replacing these caps is that this resistor here, which should have been 4.7 meg, had a 68K resistor in there. I put a 4.7 meg. So I think whoever was working on this realized there was a problem with the vertical, but they weren't hitting the problematic component. They were replacing associated parts like this 2.2 meg and this 4.7 meg, when really it was this resistor that was way off. So we'll see what happens. Oh, I also tested the tubes and they're all fine, so I know that's not a problem. But before we do that, I just noticed something else. I bumped into this cap and noticed that the joint was about to fall apart. So just like that VT71 I restored recently, this has some really dubious joints. And I see one down here too, where the component leads are just brushed up against each other and attack soldered together. Not not a recommended way to solder components in, that's for sure. Oh, and something I wanted to point out here. The SAMS is wrong. That is a 22 meg resistor, not a 2.2 meg. So if you ever work on one of these and you get the SAMS, keep that in mind. Alright, here goes another test. Well, that looks better. I think I got the tube rotated 90 degrees off, but definitely looks better. I think that splotch there is staining the glass, and that's something wrong with the phosphor. This isn't the CRT from this set, it's from another set, but I never noticed that before. Weird discoloration there. Let's see if the hole does anything. It's horizontal. Almost kinda. Hey, saw an image there for a split second. Alright. Kind of a weird ghostly image. See if fine tuning helps any. Contrast. Much help. But hey, it's progress. It's brightness, focus. Yeah, focus is kind of whacked. Alright, needs some help. Needs a lot of help, but I'm getting there.
McCoy was a boy who could play, you bet. Oh, how they swayed when he played on his old cornet. He's got a smile and a cute little style that's all his own. He'd mute his old cornet, and then he'd make it moan. Do-a-da-do-a-da-do-a-da-do. nothing to it, but it's sweet. That tune goes right to your feet. Do-what-a-do made a hit with the girls. They had their hair bobbed and gave him the curls. Oh, how he blew that do-what-a-do-what-a-do.
Okay, I replaced the remaining 3 high voltage caps and 1.05 microfarad cap on the horizontal oscillator tube, and let's see what we got now. Seems brighter, I think. Horribly out of focus. Oh, that's better. Picture's completely upside down now. Just kind of weird. Okay, there's definitely something wrong with the vertical deflection circuitry. Because, well, not only is it upside down, but when I try to vertically center the picture, this is at one extreme of the control, this is the other extreme. It should be going off one side and then off the other. All I can do is get it from about the middle to one side. In other words, it should be deflecting symmetrically about the center, and it's not. So I'll have to explore that a bit. Oh, and something else. I noticed the splotch is gone now. I think what was happening is that because of the high voltage potential was low, that it was actually a shadow caused by one of the elements in the electron gun, because the beam wasn't being accelerated and focused properly. I didn't find any problem with the wiring for the vertical deflection plates. They're not flip-flopped, and I've got solid connections going all the way from the CRT socket to the correct circuitry in the set. What I did do though is I replaced this cap, 0.004 microfarad. It's the last cap in the vertical area that I hadn't replaced, and I replaced caps in the vertical integrator and the cap that couples the video signal to the CRT, 0.05 microfarad. So, let's see what difference that made. I think the picture might be right side up now. See if I can get that to lock a little bit better. Nope, still upside down. And it's still the same deal that I can't really center it properly. I'm taking a closer look at that vertical centering control. I've got my ohm meter on the center wiper and one leg of the pot. Got it all the way at one extreme right now, got about 13 ohms. And as I rotate it, it jumps to about 100 ohms and it stays there for the entire rotation. It's a 2 mega ohm pot, so that sure isn't right. Let's check the other side of it. I can get my ohm meter down in there. Now, it could be that the pot is shot. Could be that there's a bit of a bridge in there with some solder or something. I don't know. It's kind of hard to see down in there. Alright, on the other side, one extreme, got about 8K, 16K, 10K jumping all over. As I rotate it, 200K, 300K, 400, 600, 700, 800. Now that's working right on one side, but the other side is not. Which could very well explain my problems. So, like I said, it's kind of hard to take a good look at it while it's in there. It's also kind of a pain to get out of there, because it's got the usual 3 terminals for the pot there. It's got a center tap on the other side, and it's got 2 spare lugs on the back they use as tie points. So I got a whole lot of stuff to disconnect to take a better look at it. I guess I can at least take this nut off and then maybe twist it up. Now, worst case, if it is shot, I do have a spare. I'll just be a little bit tedious to undo all these connections to swap it out. turned out that there was just a bit of debris or solder or something shorting out those pins. So now I can center the picture vertically. No problem. Also notice the picture is right side up. No magic here there. I just twisted the CRT around. The leads are kind of torqued. But there's enough slack that I was able to rotate to get a picture that's right side up. Replaced a few more caps. Picture's looking a little bit better. Still have a few more to go. And hopefully things will just keep getting better and better. Alright, so that's it for the paper caps. Some of them were a bit trickier to get at than others, but I've got them all replaced now. Now obviously I've been ignoring the electrolytics, but they seem to be holding up okay and they're not oozing. Same with the selenium rectifiers, but I will be replacing them later. And I have not checked all the resistors yet. But at this point I'm going to flip it back over and power it up yet again, see where things stand, and then I'll start tackling the electrolytics and seleniums. I do have the speaker hooked up this time, so should get some sound as well. Still kind of crummy. I think next I should do the simplest thing was check the rest of the tubes. So I've only checked the octals. I have not checked the miniature tubes in the IF strip. I mean, it's not terrible, but should be like a little better than that. Looks like the sound alignment's a little off in the video too. In other words, when I get the best sound, the video is not so high. Otherwise, though, the sound's quite good.
So many mistakes. I can't understand. Did you make that many mistakes on the other shows you worked with?